What's you seeing, all yo? We are the Soca Analysts, and today we're back with another podcast episode. We're super excited to talk about this one because this is a Trinidad Carnival 2025 recap podcast. We're going to talk a lot about our experience there this year, what events we went to, talk about some of our insights, some of our thoughts, some of our values that we learned this year from Carnival. A lot of lessons that I felt I learned personally on the road and throughout my time there. And overall, just like really excited to just present, some of our thoughts and really hear what you all may be thinking as well. So, I'm here with Savanah Grass.
Hi.
As usual. So yes, let me not waste no time. Let's get into it. So let we pull up.
DSA Analysts. Caribbean culture to the world. Subscribe now on YouTube, iTunes, podcast.
All right. Another carnival down. How many carnivals have we done? How many have you done? And then I'll say how many I've done.
I don't even know. I'd have to count. Are we counting just Trinidad Carnival?
Yeah, Trinidad Carnival specifically.
I don't know. I've been doing this for the past 10 years or so. What year is it? 2025?
Counting playing mass.
Counting playing mass.
Because we can talk about this, but that's when I really kind of like, when I ask people like, have you done Carnival? That's really what I mean, but we'll get into that.
Well, yeah, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But yeah, I would say the past like 5 or so, I don't want to count right now, but yeah, like the past 4 or 5 carnivals, depending on what you count as playing Carnival or playing mass.
You did 2017, 2018, right?
Yeah.
2019. What else? Just say all the years you've done mass.
2017, 2019, or 2020. I was there in 2018, but we didn't play mass. Mm-hmm. 2021, there was no carnival. 2022, there was no carnival. And 2023.
We did go for 2022. There wasn't mass on the road,
so
but it really
was a carnival
depends.
Experience. Yeah, it depends on what you consider, I guess, a carnival experience.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
So, yeah. I feel like I blacked out on the last 5 years of my life, honestly, with COVID. But yeah, pretty much. And then we missed last year, but we made a comeback this year.
Got it. Yeah. So for myself, I did mass 2018, did mass 2019. I filmed all 6 bands of Tribe in 2020. So even though I didn't play mass, I was still on the road with the bands, and it's there was a little bit of playing there, but mostly work. 2021, there was no carnival. 2022, you and I did a carnival experience, whatever they had, which is like we did Pan and we did a couple of other things.
We did whatever, it was carnival.
Yeah. It was like seated events with social distancing.
Carnival in like a COVID setting, essentially.
Then we did mass in 2023. We did not do carnival Monday and Tuesday. On last year we did Soca weekend, and then this year we did mass Monday and Tuesday, as well as events leading up to it. So I'd say we have a good amount of experience on the road.
Yeah, so many I'm forgetting the years, honestly, and what I did each year, but it's been a long time.
For sure. So where do we even begin? Let's see, we went into Carnival week. We flew in essentially on the Tuesday before mass, so a lot of you guys will know that as Kes Tuesday, or what it's now formally called is what? Iswe, yeah, formerly like Tuesday on the Rocks. Now it's Kes Tuesday, or the Iswe, formerly the Iswe Festival. Yeah. So we flew in there. We took that it was like, what is it, the 6 a.m. flight?
We took the 7 a.m. flight. We got there I think around 1 or 2, we picked up the car. We headed straight to Port of Spain, checked in at our accommodation this year, and straight from checking in, we literally just dropped the suitcases in the living room and went to pick up our costumes. And then straight from there, you went to pick up some drinks for the cooler because we had a cooler fete. And about 2 hours later, I collected my Monday wear, and then we went straight to a fete. So yeah, pretty much the epitome of straight off a jumbo jet.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, essentially like whenever you fly into Trinidad, if you're playing mass, and by playing mass, we mean you're getting your costume, you're gonna participate in the parade and the festivities with the carnival band, with the mass band. For Savanah and I, we played with Bliss. Bliss has pretty much been the only carnival band I've played with in Trinidad and Tobago. I know of the other bands under Tribe because like I helped film them, but yeah, like Bliss is usually who we've played it. And for those who don't know, like when you have to essentially play mass like a week before, a couple days before the Carnival Tuesday, which is when everyone puts on their costumes and like goes to actually participate, on the road, as we call it, you have to pick up your costume. Yeah, now every band kind of has different costume pickup experiences. In the past, when I've played with Bliss, like 2018, 2019 especially, the wait times used to be like pretty long. Like I think like 2018, 2019, we were waiting at the Hilton for quite some time. I want to say anywhere between like 2 to 4 hours. It used to be pretty hectic and like a very stressful experience. But this year when we went and also in 2023, like our costume pickup process was very quick. Like I definitely want to hand it to Bliss because I've definitely seen how costume pickup has gotten so much faster over the years. I think like they've really embraced technology, and like the customer service while we were there was like phenomenal. In terms of like everyone was super helpful. We were picking up costumes for multiple people, so they gave us like a little hand trolley. They helped us carry feathers to our car. They had a little bit of complimentary champagne. Like it was definitely like they turned the costume pickup into an experience, as opposed to what it used to be where they would just kind of call your number and you just kind of be sitting there and waiting. So I definitely like want to give like a huge shout out to the Bliss family, because I can definitely see the improvement there. But yeah, costume pickup is like a whole thing on its own, and it's all part of the experience, the carnival experience in total. But it's definitely been more pleasant this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I think as with all carnivals, it's important to realize that carnival is, it is a very much of a traditional, long-standing thing that it is, sacred to the island of Trinidad and Tobago, but it's also evolved, as we all know and probably have experienced. It is a business, right? It is the bread and butter at times for a lot of different folks in that industry, particularly for this time of year. And this was a longer season, and we've seen how longer seasons can burn people out and leave things subject to error or improvement. And I think one thing that I have to just commend everybody that I've at least seen play with different tribe bands and even bands outside of the tribe family, people had a pretty seamless experience. I don't know if it's because we had more time to prepare because it was a longer season, but I think in general, as we saw in 2023, I remember 2023 was fresh off COVID. So there were, I think that year, more issues, not in our experience, but just issues that we've heard other people had with just the costume quality. So that was definitely an issue, 2 years ago. I didn't hear anything of the sort extensively from last year, although we didn't play. And I would say like this year all around, from, pickup to just trying on the costume to being on the road, it was definitely, a wholesome experience. And you could see how definite efforts were made to improve, the entire experience, particularly in this post-COVID world where, 2 years ago, things may not have gone as smoothly for a lot of folks. And, Carnival being a business, it has to be run as such. That's why, I always say you can't really put a price on Carnival because it's so important to me to play mass every year. It's just such a spiritually enriching and culturally important part of my life that I can't really ever see myself going without the experiences that I have. But in the same vein, it is pretty expensive, and it becomes increasingly expensive as the years go on. And that does, exclude a number of people, both locally and also abroad, that may not have the means to come and partake in certain activities they want to partake in because it's just gotten too expensive. So I think with that being said, and remembering that there are people that do pay a lot of money to come and experience things like costume collection and just trying on their costume and hoping everything is as they wish. I think this year was really a standout year. I haven't talked to a lot of people. We just got back like 2 days ago, but from the people that I did talk to and all the reviews I've seen so far, I think, service, was impeccable across the board, just, for the general population of people who played Mass, which I'm really happy to see.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, I think we've definitely seen like things change a lot over the years when it comes to mass bands and how they implement technology and how they've taken feedback and try to slowly make improvements year after year. And I think that's a really important thing, is that like, like we saw a post like on Instagram where like a guy was pretty much talking about how like when it comes to mass, like problems like won't get solved like all at once. Like they kind of tend to get solved like little by little over time. And I guess that makes sense, right? Like mass is such like a big thing at scale. It's really hard to fix all the necessary problems that need to be fixed all within the span of a year. I think like a lot of it is kind of like trial and error and, but also like putting systems into place and like seeing how they run and like refining it. And that's definitely something like I've seen, at least, the Bliss bands do and the Bliss sections essentially do. Which I think has been really, really awesome. So yeah, that was pretty much how it went when we reached Trinidad. So we flew in, we did costume pickup, we went to a nice local cooler event, which was awesome. And then after that, we had our big event for the season, which everybody knows if you hear the name, Hyatt Lime. And it was probably my third time experiencing Lime. The first time in 2020 filming it, which was an incredible year. Second time we got to experience Lime was in 2023. Yeah, that was a good time. And then we did Lime on our own accord this year. And it was definitely an experience. I definitely enjoyed it, but I do think that there were a lot of things that I think could have been better compared to previous years. But the experience of Hyatt Lime still being Hyatt Lime was still very much there. Sometimes I just wonder, like, how can events successfully bring soca and Caribbean culture and carnival culture and combine it with like a luxury experience, right? I think that is one of the key things that so many events try to do and so many events try to market themselves as. But the only event who I feel in my experience pulls it off really, really well is Hyatt Lime. And despite there being, issues this year, I do think that they have a very unique formula to what they do. And I think that that's why I want to highlight that they did have issues, because I expect them to address them and be aware of them and give people the experience, the standard that I know that they've held up to in previous years, right? Because I know they are an event that really cares about their brand, and I know that they focus a lot on customer experience, like more than any other event I've really been to. But it does like beg the question of like, what is the right balance of like bringing Caribbean culture, soca music, carnival culture, and a luxury experience? And do those things work together, or can they be at odds just in their very nature,
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that in of itself is why all inclusives came about, essentially. I think there has always been and will always be people who are just looking for more, right? Carnival didn't start off as something that was supposed to be luxury. It was a protest and a rebellion, And in its essence, it should really still be that. But in a lot of ways, unfortunately, at times it's not. And, when I spoke about how, Carnival has outpriced certain people, or, not even certain people, but it's a lot of people, both locally and abroad. I think this is one of those questions that kind of, bring that, into the forefront is, Carnival that market for a luxury event, or should there be luxury events in Carnival? And I think, it could be yes or no, depending on who you ask. I think there's always going to be folks that want all-inclusives and love an all-inclusive. And there's always a question of, do you like cooler events or do you like all-inclusives? Because those are really the two main kind of events. And then they kind of trickle down into like breakfast fetes, evening fetes, day fetes, boat rides, beach parties. There's all these other categories that come, but really they start with, is it a cooler fete or is it an all-inclusive? And it's really the all-inclusives that started bringing about this idea of luxury, right? Because it was supposed to be you pay one fixed price, usually higher than the cost of a cooler fete ticket, and you would then expect, as we were saying with the bands, right? You're paying for a service essentially, so you expect a certain level of communication and service, and professionalism and experience because of the money that you paid. Do I agree that belongs in a Carnival setting? Not always, because like I said, there's a lot of folks that have gotten outpriced, and that in a way, to me, starts moving away from what Carnival is really about. But then there's people who would argue with me, both locally and abroad, that would say, well, there's fetes and events for everybody at every price range. And I totally agree, because we've been to some pretty awesome free events and had a wonderful time, even a better time than some of the events we paid money to go to. So I do agree with that. But I also, I think as with everything, there's two sides to each story. And I think when it comes to the talk of luxury and Carnival, for me, those are two things that never really aligned. Does that mean I don't like an all-inclusive? No, but I also think we have to level our expectations, because like I was saying before, this is an ecosystem. Carnival is a living ecosystem, and between each year, between Trinidad Carnival specifically, there's only so much you can improve upon with the feedback you get. Do we expect there to be great improvements because we're paying more money every year? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time too, these are very real humans that are running a very large service industry that could only accomplish so much based off the feedback they get every year, and based off of the funds and the availability and the bandwidth of what an island can produce from year to year. So I think those are all very real things to keep in mind. So when you talk about, that Hyatt Lime fell a little short this year, and this Hyatt Lime being the most premier luxury event of the season, essentially, I think that's to be expected, right? Every year to year, things aren't going to go perfectly. We say this all the time. There's really no such thing as a perfect Carnival, and everybody's experience is subjective, and it's really based off of how you kind of roll with the punches of what your experience throws you that year. Because we may have had a great experience with like costume collection for the past 3 years, but maybe next year it suddenly plateaus again and we don't know why. Something could be happening behind the scenes. And it's the same thing with the fete environment. Maybe there was a fete that was stellar for the past 3 to 5 years, but maybe something went wrong. Maybe their former service provider went out of business. Maybe their production partners changed. So, something's going on in the background that's just not allowing them to deliver. Or maybe someone, quite simply drops the ball, and that happens, right? At the end of the day, it's all humans running the show behind this. So I think those are all important things to keep in mind. Does that mean that we're going to write off Hyatt? Probably not. But I think it means that, even the best and the biggest and probably the most expensive fete in Trinidad can have its limitations and cannot deliver from year to year. And it just goes to show that no fete is exempt from that, right? Is it disappointing for the folks who attend? Yeah, it is. But it's up to you to decide, will you go back and keep giving them your money and hope that the next year goes back to how it was or even better? Or do we just write it off and try something else? And that's really a decision, that everybody's got to make for themselves when it comes to their carnival and fete experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because every carnival, not just Trinidad Carnival, right? But a lot of carnivals across the board, we see it year after year. Like, there's always mass bands with issues. There's always events with issues. And, like, you'll see people just take to social media. You'll see the Follow Soca page start sharing out people's experiences and stories and people bashing events, only to see the next year that they're all right back there again, right? At the same events, which I think is like really interesting and really funny. And I think that phenomena occurs because it's exactly as you said. Like, every time someone goes to an event and something goes wrong, or, whatever the case may be, whether it's an event, a band, whatever, anytime someone participates in one of these things and something goes wrong, like, you have a choice then and there. Like, you have a choice to either give it a try again and hope that it gets better, or take your dollars and go somewhere else. Right? And I think when it comes to like carnival and fete culture, especially like specifically for foreigners, and by foreigners, I mean, people like myself in New York that maybe have to like travel to go to a carnival, is like we end up getting caught up so much in like the FOMO and all this stuff of carnival and the excitement, that like we just like forget sometimes. Like, I just see people like just spontaneously be like, yeah, there were issues last year, but I'm going to give it a try again.
We have a short memory. We say this all the time, Caribbean people have a short memory. I see the same designers have trouble each year, or the same sections have trouble each year. And each year you can guarantee someone either maybe didn't do their due diligence, or someone just said, let me try it again, and they'll go back. And maybe the same thing will happen again. It sometimes does. And everybody's like, you don't remember what happened last year? Good for you. Like, this is why you have to like do your research and stop giving these people your money. Or maybe they go back and they're like, it was phenomenal. And they're like, we trusted the brand, whoever or whatever it may have been, and they delivered this time and it was worth it. So it swings two ways, but at the end of the day, you can't stop people from going where they want to go. And we do tend to have a short memory. And that begs the question too, maybe people sometimes feel like they're slim pickings and they don't know where else to go. Like, do we just not have enough resources out there for people to know where to go? I'm not sure. I like to think there's a lot, maybe even too many resources out there when it comes to carnival planning, particularly for Trinidad being so popular these days. And I think that's great. And I think, again, it really boils down to, the person, right? And them making a choice of what they want their experience to be at the end of the day, and what they want to do with their, how they want to spend their money. So yeah, I think, it's ultimately very subjective.
Well, I'm just going to be like the bad guy here, and I'm just going to like come out and say it. Like, even though I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but in my opinion, like, I've seen it, we've experienced it, like, an event in Trinidad Carnival is only amazing up until everyone finds out about it. And I know that's like a really hot take, but the reason that I stand by that is because when you have an event and you have a certain crowd and demographic and number specifically of people that you expect to come to an event, right? You know that you can give them a certain experience as a promoter, right? When okay, only catering to maybe, 2,000 people this year, right? Okay, fine. We have everything we need to make sure their experience is amazing. Now, these people come to the events, right? Everything is all Instagrammable nowadays because every event is trying to be an experience in terms of decor, in terms of customer service. And at the end of the day, the promoters and the vendors, they're all doing their jobs to make sure the experience is as amazing as possible. In fact, the experience is so amazing that everyone posts about it. Everyone tells people about it. And now the next year, your crowd, right, has suddenly doubled. And now you as a promoter are tasked with the challenge of scaling up. And now event promoters have to now make a choice where they're like, well, am I gonna accept and release all these tickets and not be so sure that I can cater to all these people? Or am I only going to allow maybe the original crowd plus maybe a 10% more on top of that and lock everything off and not make as much money this year, but slowly make money over time as they figure out the scaling up? And what we've seen a lot of times is that when everyone finds out an event, right, promoters tend to not lock it off. They tend to try to do one giant money grab all at that same time. And all of a sudden you have problems scaling up, meaning you don't have enough food. Lines are way too long. There's not enough space in the events, right? Vendors are super overwhelmed. So now the customer service starts to go down the drain because people working at the event are all frustrated. And it's just something that I feel like I've seen time and time again where events themselves in Trinidad Carnival have a lifespan. They kind of begin. Nobody really knows about it. You kind of have a certain crowd. The experience is awesome. It's kind of like an if you know, you know. Then over time, people start posting about it and talking about it in, year after year, right? It used to take years before. Now with social media, your event can blow up very quickly. Everybody kind of tends to find out about it. Promoters are left with that choice. Do they scale up and they aren't sure if they can actually handle the scale, or do they slowly kind of let people in little by little over the years and keep the client experience the top priority? Promoter will do one of those two things. And then, before you know it, once everybody finds out about it, then, not everyone can be a VIP. And that's really the sad truth, right? Is that all the events offer a VIP experience, but the very definition of VIP means exclusivity, right? And you can't give a VIP experience to every single person consistently year after year after year. And if you can, I really applaud you. But we've seen even in the most luxury events, like for example, Hyatt Lime, there are challenges with that as well. So once everybody finds out an event and it becomes the it event, that kind of marks the end of, the lifespan of that specific event. At least that's my opinion on it. I would love to hear everybody's take on that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely interested to hear people's experiences with different fetes over the years, because I think there are a lot of people listening that are probably loyalists to certain fetes. I'm definitely loyalist to certain fetes that I'm even hesitant to name because I don't want everybody to start running those fetes down too. And, I think that's kind of sad in a way, right? Because you want people to have the best carnival experience. You want people to come and experience the joy and freedom and just excitement that you get in a certain party or a certain fete that's really awesome. But in the same vein, you tell too many people, next thing you know, you're the one outside fighting for tickets and everybody else is on the inside having a good time in the fete that you told them about. So it is a very, very tight line to walk when it comes to the popularity and marketing of events. And I don't disagree with you that once an event gets too popular, you might very well be seeing the decline of it, because it does tend to fall off after it reaches its peak of popularity. And, on one hand, you got to commend them, whoever those events are or whatever those events are, for just superb marketing, because there's a reason people are running down tickets to certain events and want to be there. But in the same vein, too, I feel like committees and event promoters have a certain responsibility to adhere to the experience that they've been offering, right? So if you've been throwing a stellar event, your first 2 years were bangers right out the door, and then in your third year, you're coming around, people calling down your phone, fighting up for tickets on all of this, and there's that desire to get into your party. That's great. Keep that momentum, but don't let everybody in, because if you let everybody in and you don't have the means to scale up and allow everybody in, then that's where your branding and your reviews are going to start kind of tanking. And that's when we start to see posts hitting follow Soka. And I hate to say it, but I really hate to bash events and, just give bad reviews because I know how much work goes on behind the scenes year after year to put on these huge scale productions. And I know the thought and the intent behind all of it is probably genuine, or hopefully genuine, and not greedy. But sometimes greed is a factor. But either way, it is hard to see certain well-known events suddenly have bad reviews after a successful run of a couple years because they, let the crowd get too big. And I think that's just something that, we should really reevaluate, and people have to evaluate it too, right? You have to do your research before you spend your money of like, is this a place where you think you're going to get the bang for your buck if you're looking for certain experiences, right? We see it happen all the time with all-inclusives, right? You're going in expecting a certain experience, but then it's not up to par because there's like 500 other people in that all-inclusive or 1,000 other people in that all-inclusive also expecting an all-inclusive VIP experience. And you have to reckon with the fact that you're not all VIPs. This isn't a fete where there was a VIP. You all bought early bird tickets, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 tickets at varying prices, but you all bought tickets to one all-inclusive. And when you walk in, it's the same experience you will all get at those varying price points because it is the same ticket at the end of the day. It's just the price went up over time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that people don't realize. So someone who buys a tier 3 ticket for 250 USD versus someone who bought a early bird ticket for 100 USD, they're both clamoring to get in that fat same way. And they both spent their money, hard-earned money, and they want to enjoy it. But then they walk in and they both feel because they spent X amount of money that this line shouldn't be so long. You shouldn't have to fight up for a glass of Prosecco. The line for Hennessy shouldn't be so long. They shouldn't run out of Johnny by the bar. Like all of these things then start to really deter from the experience. And then that's when things get out of control because the scale was too wide. And there's a lot of controversy too about the whole ticket tier prices and the idea of having different tiers because, at the end of the day, it is the same ticket.
Yeah, I totally understand it. I have a feeling that part of the reason promoters do that, not only to make money, but I also wonder if it's like to deter people from buying tickets last minute and trying to like incentivize them to buy tickets early because most Soca events we go to, being on both sides where we've attended events but also helped host events, like for whatever reason, Caribbean people tend to just always buy tickets like very, very last minute. And maybe it's not only them. I think it could be just an events thing in general.
No, so I think I've seen someone put out a really good rationale for it. I wish I had it, at the top of my phone right now to pull up. But I think one of the reasons that's been offered is that the tiers of prices tend to go up closer to an event because it factors in like all the additional like last minute planning. So, if only like X amount of people actually purchased the early birds and then they ran out, or then that phase of early bird tickets closed and now they're on to tier 1, it's because maybe enough people didn't buy early birds at that price point that would have helped them fund the event. So now as you're getting closer and closer to the date of the event, you got to raise the price as people buy it to account for all of your expenses in the event at the last minute too, right? Because if only like 100 people buy $100 ticket in November, and then that November period closes out, as the event gets closer and closer, you need to know how many people are coming. But if people aren't buying as quickly as you need them to for you to scale up and do all of what you need for production and get enough caterers and get enough, porta potties and get a big enough sound system, then you are going to want more money the closer it gets to the event because you're going to need more money to pull all of those things off kind of sometimes at the last minute. So that's the rationale I've seen behind it. And in that sense, I totally get it because you want to wait last minute to come to a fete, but you forget people are behind the scenes in a fete trying to cater and guess how many people are actually coming. So, if you could argue both sides of it, that's one that makes sense. someone else might argue, well, they should just close off tickets by a certain date and tell people this is the last day so they know exactly who's coming and get their head count and they can plan accordingly. But we all know that's not how Caribbean people work. They're still going to wait till the last minute, and they're still going to look for scalpers the day of the event to come in that fat too.
I can't say I blame them, because as a good friend of ours said, who lives in Trinidad and Tobago, there is no such thing as a sold out event during Trinidad Carnival. There's always a way in. It may not be the greatest way in, but there is always a way in. So whether that be, you know, buying secondhand tickets or knowing somebody who organizes the event, or, you know, messaging people online, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, like we saw that with CIC. Like, people found ways to get into the event one way or the other, you know, and that's a pretty hard event to get tickets for. So yeah,
I mean, we saw it with Last Jam. Like, we didn't actually go to Last Jam. We were in the country, but Last Jam was this year, for those of you who don't know, it was no physical. So it was a digital ticket only. It sold out very early on, which means there should have been no scalpers. There should have been no other way to get into that event unless you bought a ticket online before it sold out. And people were warned, you know, Tribe, all the bands put out notices and said, hey, if you have a physical ticket, it's probably not legitimate because we only did digital tickets. And there were still people that waited till the day of, the day before, and bought tickets for what I hear pretty absurd prices for a Last Jam ticket, for being real. And then they got there and their ticket wouldn't scan because it was last year's Last Jam ticket. And we're talking, like, I saw people paying upwards of 1,200 TTD for those tickets to go to Last Jam. So, you know, it's pretty sad because that's someone's hard-earned money. They really wanted to go to the event. They waited. Maybe their plans changed last minute, and now they're out of pocket 1,200 TTD that you know you're not getting back, and you didn't get in the party. So that's why, you know, there are events that do cap and they do put a deadline, and tickets do run out at a certain time, and you truly may not actually get a ticket to get in. And I kind of commend them in that sense, because they knew how many people they could hold capacity for. The tickets sold out because it's popular. They made public what the price range of tickets were. And if you went ahead and you still bought a ticket out of that price range from someone who is not an authorized ticket seller, it was a risk that you unfortunately took on. And I would say if other events followed suit in Trinidad, we would see a lot of disgruntled people, because we know this would happen. People would wait until the last minute to go try to get a ticket, buy it at a higher price, and end up stuck outside the gate while everybody's inside, you know, mad and out of pocket.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like a real issue. And that's something that's, you know, like the whole secondhand market, it is a bit of a shifty market, especially when it comes specifically to Trinidad Carnival and Fat tickets and stuff, because there's no way to really like know for sure if you're getting scammed or not when you're buying secondhand tickets. And I just always urge people, like unless you can get tickets from, you know, someone who you know for sure, like a friend who bought a ticket, and they're able to verify, like, yo, yes, I bought this ticket and I'm giving it to you. Or unless you know a committee member, like, I'd rather just wait for another year to go to an event. Like, there's other things you can do. But the problem is like during Carnival, especially like with Caribbean people, and like we've been victim to it too, like we've done it. It's like FOMO, right? You hear all your friends, or you hear a certain amount of people are going to one big bad fete, and, you know, you don't want to miss out. So like, you know, the brain kicks into overdrive, and you're like, I need to do whatever I need to do to like get into this event, you know? And when you do that, it makes people desperate, and desperate people like aren't thinking straight, when in reality, it's like, what I try to do now is take a step back and just realize, like, dude, the event's going to be there next year. No matter what, it's going to be there. Right.
Yeah.
And what we FOMO into this whole thing about is like also what's marketed to us, which is like, oh, well, you never know. This year could be one of the best years ever. But also maybe not. As we've seen with some of the events we've gone to, it could also be a not so great year with a lot of issues, right? You don't really know, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we saw that with like some of the events we went to. Like we like, you know, we did our research based on previous years, we saw that like certain events were really good. We went, and then it turns out that like there were issues, right? So not everything you see, and when it comes to the hype of events, actually describes the reality of that event, you know?
Yeah.
And I think people need to start realizing that.
And listen, there's so many events. Like, you don't need to. I personally, I know people who have FOMO'd into events and they get a ticket from a scalper, they go and they have the best time. Like, I know actually a lot of people who have done that. Me personally, I'm 3 for free. I've never FOMO'd into an event and actually enjoyed it. Yeah. I would say the 3 times I recall we've done that, where we've like just said we're going to try it because it's so good, or we FOMO in at the last minute and we buy tickets, you know, at market value, thankfully, and we go, wasn't worth it. Wasn't
Every
all
event,
that. It was bad? No. Yeah. Was it great? No. So I've never, and there's so many other events that if you can't get tickets to one, try something else. Take your crew and go somewhere else. Try something different. Diversify your FET experience, because the same 3, 4, 5, 6 FETs that you run down FET after FET every year is still going to be there next year, and it's not changing. And that's just my 2 cents on that. I know people are definitely FET loyalists to certain events, and I think that's great. If you've gone consistently and always have had a good enough time, even if certain years have fallen off, then that's great. That shows that where you're going is probably the place for you, because you chose your FET wisely and you know that that's an experience you're going to enjoy. For other people like us who we've hopped around, we've gotten burned here or there, and we've definitely said we're never going back to that. But at least we know now because we tried it. We wouldn't have known if we didn't try it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Every event that I've ever FOMO'd into has never ended well. Like, and all the events that I went to maybe on like a friend recommendation and kind of planned it beforehand, for the most part worked out well, up until maybe the event got too well known and just wasn't the same experience anymore. But I still have the memories of when it was good, which I'm always grateful for. But yeah, that leads me to another question, right? Because we talk about events and events having a lifespan, and, you know, events that try to scale up could have issues. And, you know, the next thing I wanted to talk about was like people and experience and like types of people. But, you know, you could say as much or as little as you want to about this, but this is like just my honest thing. Like, one thing that I think I've learned over the past couple years of doing Trinidad Carnival, and we've spoken about this on previous episodes, is there is an experience for everyone. But what I also really want to highlight is that there is an experience for Trinidad Carnival that locals know and specifically belongs to the locals of Trinidad and Tobago. And then there is an experience specifically for foreigners. And by foreigners, I mean Caribbean people flying in, and also non-Caribbean people too. And there are events that are very much specifically local Trinidadian events, and there's also events specifically marketed to for foreigners, right? And I think that there's a very clear distinction between culture, demographics, and values of those two crowds, specifically local Trinidadian events and events catered to the quote-unquote like foreigners. But the one thing that I want to talk about is the unspoken rule that I've seen over the years of Trinidad Carnival is for local Trinidadians, once the foreign crowd finds out about a local Trinidadian event for whatever reason, especially if it's really good and full of vibes, and once the foreign people find out about said events and you start to slowly watch that crowd transition from a local crowd into a foreign crowd, that marks the end of the lifespan for that event as you know it. And I've seen that like firsthand with some of the events that I've gone to, where I went to an event like in 2018. Amazing events, right? And I remember that crowd was probably like 30%, 40% kind of people flying in, kind of like if you know, you know. And the remaining portion of that crowd was very much local Trinidadian people. And I remember the vibes just being so different. Like I genuinely felt that love and that energy and that unity of Carnival, where I just did not feel any type of judgment. And each year as I went back to the event, I noticed more and more and more that crowd was just slowly being replaced with Caribbean people from Queens, Caribbean people from Brooklyn, Caribbean people from Florida. And slowly all of the local Trinidadian people that used to go there didn't go anymore. And I remember I spoke to a local person in the island about it, and I was just like, yo, how come like you don't go to this event anymore? And he was like, oh, that event? Nah, boy, that event gone through. And that's just all they really say about it. And I've just learned over the years that when foreign people come to Trinidad Carnival, and if they find out about a local Trinidadian event and they start to attend the events in mass numbers, for local people, it marks the end of that event pretty much being a really good experience and a good event.
Yeah, that's a pretty firm take. I think it again is subjective, as you said, to your experience. I think that's probably definitely been the case, and I know we've talked about it on former podcasts. I think there's still events you could go where there's definitely a mix of both, like local people still really love it, but you also see a lot of foreigners love it as well. And I'll just be frank, it's Soca Brainwash, right? Like everybody loves Soca Brainwash, and that's an event that happens Carnival Saturday, and I see a good set of local folks that I just follow or know of on the island that go year after year and seem to have a phenomenal time. But I also know we have a lot of friends here that also fly in for Soca Brainwash specifically because they love the event. So I think those are events that the marketing obviously that Private Ryan has is so strong, and the branding around Brainwash is so strong that it doesn't essentially discriminate. Everybody could go and have a great time if you love Soca and if you are a fan of Private Ryan specifically and the themes, themed events, because that's what he does year after year. So I think there's still events that hold a balance and do it really well, and those are usually events that have a good marketing and a good committee and like strong branding behind it. Has Soca Brainwash, as we know, maybe fluctuated throughout the years in terms of how great it was? Yeah, sure. It's not really an event that I personally go to, but that's what we've heard, and I know you've experienced that. In the same vein though, I know the event that you're referencing from 2018, and I didn't frequent that event myself, but when I did go, I did look around and say, what kind of event is this? Because it lacked vibes. It wasn't, everything about it was just off. It didn't strike me as a fete. It was more of like, just kind of stand there.
It was just people on their phones just there to say that they were there. Like, let's be real, right? It's just girls on their phone. And
it's people taking videos and taking pictures and people eating, and obviously people, drinking and having a good time with their immediate circle. What I found that really signifies to me that it's not really an inclusive event of both, a healthy mix of both people who live there and people who fly in for an event, is that it's kind of dead, and it becomes very cliquey. I cannot stand a fete where there's only one demographic and there's only one set of people, and all the set of people that's standing up in there is like on their phone or with their own group, and it's all very much like I'm standing in a club in New York rather than I'm at a fete in Trinidad. And I don't know about everybody else, but I don't like to stand up in a fete, and I certainly don't like to just talk to the people that I came with in that fete. Do I stick with my group? Yes. But if I'm dancing and jumping and waving and then someone's recording me on their phone standing next to me, I'm going to feel a little way about that. I'm going to feel uncomfortable and I'm not going to enjoy that party anymore because it's going to feel like I'm on display for everybody. And, you know, we've had this conversation before about like how fete culture has changed and how, you know, people come in and maybe they're overwhelmed or in a culture shock or just like in awe of like how phenomenal fetes are in Trinidad, because they are. Our productions are unlike anything I've ever seen in this world. And you could really only see that in Trinidad, if I'm being biased, because I am. But in the same vein, that doesn't mean come and set up on your phone. That means come and immerse yourself in it. Enjoy it. Don't just be with your group. It means this is the time to free up and get out of your comfort zone and not record everything that's happening in the party to review it on Instagram later, but actually put down your phone, take your little video, take your picture with the props, and then move on. Like, that's like the first thing I do in every event. I go, I get my cute little pictures, and then my phone goes in my bag, because if it stays out my bag, it's going to get mashed up. And that's how we fet. And that's how I think most people should fet. And if that's not the kind of fet for you, stay home. Go to the back of the fet. Find another event, because I am tired of these events where you go because you hear good things and you see good things on social media, and there's so many TikToks and Instagram reels about my time at this fet, and they show me all the food and the pretty props and the backdrops and all the cute dresses that everybody was wearing. And then I get there because I'm like, this looks so nice. I want to experience it too. And I want to go mash up that party. And then I go and the party is just mash up. And everybody in it looks mash up because they're clicky, they're on their phone, and they're just recording. And that's great for marketing. And I'm sure the committees and the event promoters throwing the events love you in your party. But as a patron, I don't love you in a party because you're not fun. You're not fun to fet with. I don't even know why you're in a fet if you're just going to be on your phone. And that's something that I know Bungie Garland would agree with, because a lot of soca artists that come and perform at these parties for you, they get mad when all they see is phones in their face and they're trying to engage you as a crowd. And that's something that's been a big problem in Carnival for the past few years since influencer culture has taken over. And I think it's time. And this year, I will admit, I saw people moving away from that and putting their phones down and just enjoying themselves. And props to those people. I hope you had a great carnival. I mean, I hope everybody had a great carnival. But really, it's there for you to enjoy. You spend so much money. Why are you going to stand up on your phone?
Yeah, no, those are like all like really, really excellent points. I'm going to take it a step further, right? Because we say Trinidad Carnival is there for everyone to enjoy. And to a degree, I believe that, right? And what I'm about to say is like a pretty strong opinion of mine, but I do very much hold firm to it. And it's just something that I've picked up from like living in Asia for a year and just being around other people and other cultures, especially when you're like a minority in another country. To me personally, I do believe that Trinidad Carnival is, let me think about how much this. I believe first and foremost, and like I truly do believe that Trinidad Carnival belongs first and foremost to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Before anybody else, it belongs to them. Like I look at Trinidad Carnival as like, this is their festival, it's their tradition, and everybody else, like even us who are of Caribbean descent and we fly into Trinidad Carnival to see it, like we're there to participate and experience and enjoy, but the carnival doesn't belong to us. And the reason why I want to say that is because whenever I reach Trinidad Carnival, right, there's just certain things that I'm always in awe of. Not of the carnival specifically, but of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Every time I go to Trinidad, every time I go to Trinidad and Tobago, I'm always in awe of people's kindness. I'm always in awe of their lifestyle. I'm always in awe of how they treat people like family, how much they value interpersonal relationships. I'm always in awe of how they are just grateful to be alive and to look for an opportunity to celebrate. And whenever I see people fly into Trinidad Carnival, especially from the States, that come in with like a very entitled attitude in terms of, I'm here, I paid my money to be here, I want this, I expect this, things need to revolve around me because I paid for it. It's like, I just get so disgusted. And I get it. I've been there. I know when I go to certain places in Trinidad, especially an event that I paid a lot of money for, it can be frustrating when things don't go your way and when you don't get what you expected. And is it wrong? Yeah. But at the end of the day, I still look at it, no matter how frustrated and angry I get, I will just shrug my shoulders and take a drink and just be like, well, you know what, man? Like, this is shitty, but at the end of the day, it's not my country. Like, this belongs to other people. This is all organized for people that live here. Yeah. Right? And we are just there to participate. We are guests in the carnival experience, right? We didn't create it and we don't own it. We contributed, and we do contribute economically, right? But at the end of the day, I'm never going to go to Trinidad and Tobago and tell people there, like, what a carnival experience needs to be like in their own island or what things need to be done. I will give suggestions on how to make an experience better, how to appeal to a certain crowd or to a certain demographic. But I'm really tired of seeing people go to Trinidad Carnival and like just claim it as their own and just be so nasty to some of the people that live there. And when we're on the road and they're side-eyeing some of the people who are just there spectating and like looking at them like riffraff and like not understanding that there is a whole culture of playing mass and understanding that people come out to watch you because they're in awe, and it goes for at events too. Like, I'm tired of like going to events and just like seeing people like not from the country like treat local workers there a certain way, right? I think like one of the things that like we saw when we went to one of the events was like two dudes from Brooklyn cursing out two dudes from Trinidad, and they're both cursing at each other in their own like native like just their own accents, right? Yeah, people talking from like their New York accent, like, yo, what the fuck you talking about, bro? Blah blah blah. And then you have Trini people arguing with the people like, boy, holy you cunt, and blah 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 blah. And it's like, that to me is like such a perfect description of like the disconnect that you see so much between like when foreign people go to the island and the local people that live there. It's a comedic one in that specific instance, but like I think we finally need to stop like BSing and just finally start realizing that there is a clear disconnect between foreigners participating in Trinidad Carnival and the local people that live there. And the sooner that we can start talking about and being more comfortable with this disconnect, the sooner that we can bridge it. Because I don't think it always existed, and I do think there are ways to fix it. And like, we as Caribbean people and people who are supporting Trinidad Carnival as guests on this beautiful country, like, we need to start figuring out ways to like really blend seamlessly between, both crowds. Like, we really have to find a way to do that, or else the culture like forever splinters and changes, and I think could possibly die if we don't find ways to actually bridge this disconnect.
Well, I don't even think it's, those are all really great points, but it's not blending it. Like, there should be no blending of what people want from coming here to what's happening over there. I think it's important to remember, for people who are not of the culture, or people who are of the culture from different islands, or people who are, descendant of the culture, whatever you want to call it. I think it's important for everybody to remember, everybody that's flying in to remember that you are participating in something that may culturally be yours, because culturally it's mine, but I don't live there. And for a lot of people that are flying in like ourselves, we are being given the gift of participation in Carnival. And Carnival is a gift, even to people who live there. But historically, it is the people who live there. It's their own. It's a testament to history, to the freedom that was fought for, the protests, the resilience that went into those protests, that ultimately everything that we know about Carnival today was born out of a rebellion against the elitists, the upper class, the people who were at one point in time oppressing the natives and the people that were of that island. So for us to fly in and essentially do just that, oppress people in their native space by having certain untoward expectations of what their carnival experience should be, it's not right. It's in its essence, it's taking us back to what carnival was not supposed to be. So I just urge everybody to participate in something culturally when you go there. Take in Camboulet, take in a steel panorama, go to Panorama, try a free event, and see how others enjoy carnival time on their island, because that's when you'll really start to get a sense of appreciation of why this is so much more than you and your experience. Because yes, carnival is something that we all work hard to enjoy, because yes, it has become a business and it is expensive to partake in. But that does not mean that your carnival experience is the only one. For a lot of people, carnival is actually just not going to work Monday, Tuesday, and going out to spectate. Spectatorship is a big part of the carnival parade. And it's kind of died out in certain ways because the parade route's gotten a little convoluted over the years and it's changed so much. So certain hubs that are the carnival bands used to pass through, we don't pass through them anymore, or there's no consistency in it from year to year. So the vendors that used to be at the side of the road catering to the spectators and even catering to the masqueraders, because bands didn't always used to be all inclusive, or not, at least not to the level that we know it today. Those are people that lost their livelihood or had their livelihood pulled away from them as we've evolved and made bands more sophisticated and more all-inclusive. And as spectators started staying home on Carnival Monday, Tuesday, because the routes are too hard to figure out, or we don't know where the band's passing anymore. So they're like, what's the point if only one band's coming down this road? Why am I standing out there in the hot sun all day? Those are things that for them that lived there, that was carnival. That was carnival time. And they had just as much fun as the people on the road, because the people on the road never used to side-eye the people spectating and never used to feel like they were walking down a catwalk. You're actually walking down historic roads in Port of Spain. And a lot of that people don't even know. And if you just took some time to you don't have to read a history book and learn all the names and learn everything, that made carnival what it is today, but at least have some appreciation for the fact that you are participating. And if you have the means to come and participate and fuel the economy and, just enjoy yourself, because if you work so hard to spend your money in carnival, you deserve to enjoy it. But at least just be mindful of the people around you, and that not everybody that wants to participate can actually afford to participate. And does that mean you shouldn't shell out your money and have a great time? No, it just means be a little mindful of the fact that you have the opportunity to participate, and that it is indeed participation. It's not ownership. You do not own another country's history and carnival. That in of itself, the ability to participate in it is something that's a privilege and should be treated as such.
Yeah, I think that was extremely, extremely well said. And I think that's something we both agree on. Very much so. I do think it's really important to touch on the aspect of classism and carnival, because that is a very reoccurring thing that I've seen year after year. And I realized from the very first time I played Mass to now, and also have attended events, that it's not something that people really like to openly talk about. And I understand why. But I think that, it needs to be highlighted and spoken about if we want to understand how we can improve the experience of Mass, pretty much for everybody to a certain degree, right? and to get people to like understand and appreciate mass more, to be on the same page. But one thing I definitely want to like just say first and foremost is that, like, yes, I've noticed that over the years, mass and carnival fetes and just the culture and the vibe behind it have definitely like become more classist. Meaning you're going to see like certain demographics of people only have access to certain parts of carnival culture and how it's marketed. And by that, I mean specifically, like, let's take mass bands, for example, right? You can have certain mass bands that are going to be for a very specific demographic of people. They have some bands where you'll notice that it will be predominantly like only, let's say, for example, like white Trinidadians, or you may have another band where it's like light-skinned Indian people, and then you have other bands where there are darker-skinned people. And then you'll also notice that like a lot of the people sometimes in some of the bands who are like service workers tend to also be of like also a certain skin tone and ethnicity, right? Usually darker colored people. And there's like a saying that I like, remember from a book that was like, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. And I just like, there's just like the image stuck in my head of like whenever like I play mass with certain bands, especially like with Bliss, which is like the hot gal band, right? Like I get it. It's glamorous and it's beautiful and it is a fun band, right? But whenever I play with bands like, that tend to have a crowd that are of a little bit more affluence, like could be like upper middle class or more. Even though I have a great time and it's so nice to like watch everybody in the band having a great time, I always feel, a part of me always feels really conflicted, because whenever I look out to the locals, or whenever I look at some of the workers or the people pulling the carts with like girls standing on it, I just can't help but feel like it's still a tale of two cities. Like I still can't help but feel that there is some sort of disconnect in terms of class when it comes to mass bands and the experience that pretty much mostly like more wealthier people get to experience in a certain way, kind of like at the expense sometimes of like the other people that live there, And I know there's two sides to that argument. I know like on the other side, people could be like, well, mass in the carnival creates so many jobs, and people are coming out for a reason, and everybody that's doing the job is, it's all consensual. You know what I mean? They're all there because they want to work and earn money, and I get it, right? But I just think for a moment, we do need to look at how we're playing mass and how we're treating other people around us and how we're treating like workers. And like sometimes I just can't help but like take a mental snapshot in my head of what I see in front of me during mass and compare it to what I've seen in the past, which is like sometimes just like darker skinned people doing labor for wealthier, lighter skinned looking people, right? And I don't think that these things are intentional at all. It's just something that I've just observed. And that's just when it comes to like just being on the road, right? But I think where we really always feel a lot of emotion is like really when the bands like get to like East Port of Spain, and you really see a lot of people come out to spectate there. And I think for myself, it's one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking experiences at the same time. Like, it's such an incredible experience to see people in East Port of Spain come out and just genuinely be so excited. Like, people waving at us, people smiling, people dancing as you go by, people so in awe of people's costumes, people so in awe of the beauty of the women on the road, and just them getting to see and experience mass, right? And knowing that they're there to see you. Like I like teared up a little bit when I just saw the smiles on these people's faces, especially seeing the kids. Like seeing kids like sitting on the shoulders of their parents and dancing as the band comes down. Like that's an image that I just think is like one of the most like beautiful parts of mass. And it's not something that like people really like talk about and really market as a carnival experience, especially when it comes to like the hot gal bands and stuff, right? But I think that's one of the most beautiful things. At the same time, I also feel like kind of heartbroken about it too, because I know that for a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago, like they cannot afford to play mass. This is the closest thing that they're getting to seeing their culture. And they're watching me, like someone who's not even a local Trinidadian, experience the culture, like essentially like, you know, like it's almost like they're watching mass through me, you know? And a lot of times like that's such a profound experience to me, because I just feel like, you know, like these people deserve to this is their festival, you know? And obviously to see the classism too of, you know, the people that are on the streets of Port of Spain, like it can be like kind of heartbreaking. So every time I do mass, I think I always feel such a roller coaster of emotions, because not just of the routes and how long it is, because it is essentially a marathon, and battling with things like heat exhaustion and just frustration and feeling crowded on the road and having to push through all of that, all the exhaustion, all the negative feelings, to then reach the gratefulness of certain parts where I'm jumping up with my friends and my family and having such a great time. That's just one part of the roller coaster of emotions. But really for me, it's just seeing all those people on the road and just understanding that, like, while it is such a beautiful experience, I still cannot help but just realize that like there are still so many problems in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to class divide. And I just wish that there were ways that like we could really spread that feeling of mass like so much more to everybody. But maybe that's just me. I think maybe people who live there maybe might see things a little bit differently. But I don't know. I just say that because I just wonder if there's other people out there that feel the same way too.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. I think, you know, I'm sorry.
That was a lot of shit.
Well, you weren't wrong in saying that mass is certainly a roller coaster.
like that whole rant just that I just know was like literally a roller coaster of emotions. I might try saying that again at one point to make it more concise.
Yeah, but this is your belated crash out. Like, you're a week late. This is just everything that he went through in the span of like 48 hours a week ago. So, yeah. But that's not to say he didn't make good points. I think, you know, not to be devil's advocate, but I think there is a certain guilt. I think that's what you're getting at there. There's like a guilt of knowing that it is a privilege, unfortunately, these days to play in mass, or to play mass. Sorry, that's not proper. But yeah, it is a privilege to play in certain bands, you know, and to be able to forget certain bands. It is a privilege to just be able to afford the luxury that is mass, you know. A lot of bands quote in USD. I've seen that like as a hot topic this year. Like, why are you quoting in USD? It's Trinidad and Tobago. It should be TTD. So, you know, I've seen, and even for Fed tickets, it's the same thing. You know, why are Fed tickets in USD? They should be TTD. Like, the minute the Fed tickets are in USD, I'm already raising my eyebrows because I know it's going to be expensive. And again, that's just showing you, and it goes back to what we've been saying. I think a theme of this episode is just that, you know, Carnival has unfortunately become a business, and in some ways that's great. It creates jobs. There is an industry of people that make mass happen year to year, make mass and feds happen year to year, that are supported by how expensive these things are. That's their livelihood and their workers' livelihood year in and year out, particularly maybe even concentrated to this time period of year especially. So I think that is something to keep in mind. And again, I've seen folks that live there argue that, you know, everybody may not be able to afford mass, which sucks, right? Because it is, to me, a God-given right of anybody that's there, right? That you should be able to partake in your country's history and in your country's festival, there are some people that live there that just simply don't like mass and don't believe in carnival. And that's not something that whether they personally or their religion don't support. And that's a reason a lot of people may not partake. But then, like, Rich was saying, there's also the class divide where people may want to partake. And I was saying this earlier on, there's simply certain things that people may desperately want to partake in, like playing with a certain band that they just can't get into or they can't afford, or it's not worth it to them because it's so expensive. And it is heartbreaking because we know there's stories like that and there's people that go through that. In the same vein, I've had people argue, and I've seen people argue back, even folks that do live there, that there is an experience for everybody. So if you want to play with a local band that's more affordable, if you want to partake in events that aren't quoted in USD that are, a little smaller, maybe they're not all inclusive, maybe they're cooler events, whatever they may be, there's a price point and an event and an experience for everybody, based off of whatever budget you're working with. And I think, to the point that I was making before, spectatorship is a big part of Carnival that's unfortunately died out. And this year we had, a great experience both days, in that we were lucky enough in our band to cross both stages both days. That's not something that happens for everybody in every carnival. And to be able to do it 2 days on the road back to back, to me, as a carnival, like just such a carnival lover, it was a profound experience, and I do not take that for granted. I enjoyed every moment of it. For others, it was a roller coaster. It's a long day. It does take endurance. But I think to the point that Rich was making, that spectatorship culture is a part of carnival culture. And there are a lot of people, particularly kids and teenagers, whose families, maybe they don't actually live in Port of Spain. They might have actually driven into Port of Spain simply for the spectatorship. And there are certain routes that the parade used to take when Carnival wasn't as big, when the bands weren't as big, when the roads weren't as congested, like Frederick Street, for example, where it used to be lined with vendors, and it used to be almost an intersection of spectators and masqueraders, because you had masqueraders running off to the side of the road to buy food from a local vendor to keep themselves, fed on the road as they made their trek to the Savanah stage. And there were people that would come out and sell drinks to those folks spectating, so they could also take a little thing and enjoy themselves while the bands were passing, so they could enjoy the music and also indulge a little while on the road and watching the masqueraders pass by. So it didn't used to feel so siloed, at least not back in the day. I mean, I wasn't there, but my parents played mass. Like, I've heard the stories, and I know it's a different world we're in now. And I think that's really what the saddest thing is of it all. Classism definitely is still a big issue, both there and throughout. I mean, really anywhere, even where we are today in, the good old States, it is still a very real issue anywhere you go. And I think that's a global problem, unfortunately, that we're all facing, not to diminish what the islands in particular go through, because I know it is a thing there too. But I think specifically when you're talking about Carnival, there is still an experience for everyone, and some people would agree with that. Some people would disagree with that. What I do think is sad is the way that the carnival culture historically has died and changed in certain ways that makes it less accessible to a lot of people, and that certain traditions or certain rites of passage in carnival aren't the same. So like that spectator aspect has diminished because, like I said, the parade routes aren't static and they change from year to year. And there's a lot less people coming out to watch the spectacle that is the mass bands passing the parade, because there's no, clarity in like, where's the best place to go. And vendors, unfortunately, have suffered because of that. And that's livelihood that's being taken away from people who years ago might have prospered during that specific time, both from foreigners who come in to even watch the parade and not participate in mass, but specifically the locals as well, who really, that for them was their carnival time, even if they weren't masqueraders, because maybe they don't they couldn't afford to play in a band. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe that wasn't their thing, putting on a costume and parading. But maybe watching Carnival and having that experience of watching the parade pass, watching mass pass with your family, I know that was pivotal to a lot of folks growing up. And that's what created a lot of lovers of mass. That's why for me, an important part of playing mass is interacting with people that I see on the road, whether they're in my band or not in my band. You know, once we get into the Savanah, it kind of becomes a free-for-all, which for some people is a little disconcerting because it's a lot of people. It's a very jam-packed space. You know, if you're playing in a band, your drink trucks kind of goes that way and you're just stuck in the Savanah filled with spectators, usually on both sides. And, you know, for a lot of people that could be overwhelming because you're just in this mass crowd waiting to cross the stage. For me, it's not that terrible. Yes, you have to worry, you know, about getting separated from your group. There may be, you know, people are always worried about pickpocketers or, you know, just people moving through the crowd of masqueraders that might try to be advantageous. But for me, it's still really beautiful. And that moment is actually such a testament to historical carnival culture because that is what it's all about. Before there was the Socodrome, there was and always will be for me the Savanah stage. And that movement through the Savanah to the entrance to the, you know, the foot of the Savanah stage has always been such an important part because you get to see the spectators and you get to see them oftentimes having a really good time watching your bands pass, enjoying the music that the trucks are playing, looking at the different costumes, looking for family members that are playing mass. You know, that's a thing that my family used to do. Not all my aunties and everybody played mass, but they used to look for us. They used to come and sit in the stands to see us cross the stage. And that in of itself is just, that is carnival culture. You don't have to be in a band and playing mass on the road to participate in carnival and playing mass. That spectatorship is a big part of it. And, you know, hailing out your loved ones and just relishing in the beauty of our culture is a big part of mass. So when I had the opportunity to kind of segue out the band this year, I saw a family, you know, and there was a little girl and they actually stopped me to tell me that they liked my costume. And I was immediately compelled. I grabbed the piece of costume that I had tied to your arm that I got fed up of wearing, and I tied it around her neck, and she gave me the brightest smile. And it's things like that that remind me that carnival is not about our experience. It's about the collective experience. It's about what we all share. It's about our love and our light and our history and our resilience and the continued rebellion that we should still have for current events today, because carnival is and always will be to me a protest. And I make every carnival an effort to just proactively remember what it is that I'm lucky to have in my life and what it is that historically people's ancestors and our ancestors and the people that came before us that played mass perpetuated by showing up and doing this thing every year and keeping our culture alive. And being able to share that with the next generation on the road and seeing children's faces light up, that to me is the best part about playing mass, because I know once that bug bites them, they will one day probably be a masquerader or someone designing a costume or someone, you know, on a committee in a mass band making mass better for generations to come. And that to me is the most important part of playing mass. It's that perpetuating it forward and keeping that wheel and that love of culture and history and appreciation for culture and history going.
That was really beautifully said. Yeah, I think that was like everything that I was feeling, but you summed it up like really nicely, which I'm super grateful for. I'm just going to say something. This is, you know, not something that like we have to go into. I just want to talk about this to have like content later. But I do think it's also important just to talk about like how is mass marketed versus like everything you just said, right? So like one of the things that I've noticed, especially when it comes to like a lot of the big bands, like the Tribe bands, Yuma, you know, all the very big bands essentially. One of the things I've noticed is that the way that large, well-known bands market Carnival and Mass Monday and Tuesday is not necessarily in line with like the true culture of Carnival and as Mass as a rebellion, right? And I think that's really important because the way that large bands market Carnival is they market it as one giant party, like one big party with like lots of hot gal and lots of smiling faces and drink your drinks and like forget all your worries and just celebrate everything in this moment and, you know, ignore all the messed up things going on around you, even though when you're crossing the streets of Sport of Spain, some of those things are just very much apparently in your face, like the classism. And, you know, I think that like we need to acknowledge that like that Mass is a lot more than that. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we're starting to see like why elements of roots and tradition and culture were so popular this year. Because if you ask me, I think the formula of marketing Mass as one big party with hot gal and having fun is gonna become very old and very stale. And I think it's already starting to happen. And I think people do want to experience more. Maybe not everybody, not everyone in the masses, but there are more and more people that I talk to each year that do want to experience some of the deeper and more cultural aspects of Mass, right? And I think that's why like I have a lot of admiration for bands like that are local that still do that, but also like for bands like Lost Tribe where they have gone the route of having more traditional costumes, right? They haven't given in to the vanity of like we need to market our band as hot gal and guys with six packs and everyone drinking and having fun to sell. Like that's not how they sell. And I just have a lot of respect for that because I do think that the way that, you know, Lost Tribe does their marketing and who they appeal to and why they do what they do really tells the story of Mass, which is we are here to put on a presentation of culture, right? And I think it's really, really important to have that. Now, is having Mass bands, you know, that market Mass as a party wrong? Like, is it unethical? No. But I do think that you do run the risk of painting Mass as something that isn't entirely true to its roots and its traditions. And I do think that as long as the road exists, there should be in some shape or form some sort of homage to like why we do this in the first place. You know, that's really like how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, Lost Tribe definitely deserves all their flowers. Winning Band of the Year again, especially in their anniversary year, is no small feat. And they are a beautiful, beautiful band. We had the pleasure of bumping into some of their masqueraders and just having a pleasant conversation as we were walking to Last Lap or somewhere. I don't even remember where we were going at this point. But, you know, they just have such a zest and such a pride in our culture that I just love about the entire Lost Tribe family. I wish one day to have the opportunity to play with them because they are a really beautiful band. And, you know, I think the odes to culture and legacy and history that they pay in their presentations and in their costumes each year is just really just 10 out of 10, no notes. Like they have really set the bar for traditional Mass in a modern way. And for that, I really rate them. Even though I haven't had the pleasure of playing with them, I hope one day I will get to experience that. And I just hope they continue it for as long as possible so that I one day can partake in it. But yeah, just really impeccable, you know, presentation and band year after year. To your point about, you know, other bands, right? And not to call names, right? But I think Carnival has gotten to the point, and we touched on this in just various topics earlier on, where it is truly all marketing, right? And that's how certain fetes, as we said, become too popular at one point or the other, because if you have really good marketing and everybody in your fetes going home to make a reel about what a great time they had in this party, then you know for sure you're going to get run through next year. Ticket sales out the door to the point where you have to make that call of how to scale. It's the same thing with bands. Unfortunately, I feel that, you know, certain bands gain popularity and certain sections gain popularity solely off of their marketing. And if you're looking to attract the tourist crowd, the folks that are flying in, then it really is all in your marketing, because how do you pick when you fly in what band you play in? Most people go with the band that their friends play with, that their family plays with, that someone recommended to them to. If they have a link to that band, the band that responds, you know, when it comes time for registration, that usually dictates those things where a foreigner ends up. So how do you get a foreigner to come play in your section, come jump with your band? That's really where we see marketing sections come into play, right? Most sections in any given band is marketed by another group, whether it's a committee, a company, a conglomerate of, you know, people that came together, you know, whether it's multiple committees or multiple companies, whatever it may be. They have their sponsors, and in order to get people to fill up their section, they got to market year after year. And we've seen sections and marketing partners and committees come and go in bands, right? We've seen some kind of end and fall off over the past few years, and we've seen new ones pop up. We participated in a new one this year, which I will not mention because I love them and I'm going back most likely. And that's not me gatekeeping as much as it is that's something that I know I personally loved. I don't think everybody else that's listening or watching may feel the same way or may be looking for that experience, which is why I would never recommend anything to anyone, because everybody's experience is different. But if you're a first timer and you haven't had the experience to understand what are you looking for in mass, what do you want your road experience to be like, you're going to go off of what you see on Instagram. And that's really where marketing takes over. How do you get people to jump in your section and fill it up? And, you know, who do you want to fill your section? Are you a female only section because you know, that's what your costume is made for, and you don't really need a male costume because you know you're going to get all the females running to your section? That's cool. Are you going to be, you know, there's just so many different types. And I think that's for everybody to decide, right? Like where they want to play mass, but it's also, you know, where they feel most comfortable or most pulled to. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that a lot of the marketing starts to look the same because everybody's trying to be the newest and greatest and the most attractive and the most fun and the most exciting and lit section that you could possibly play in. So how do you get people to come? You have to try to make your section look like the best, look like the most fun. And that's really just, it's hard, you know? I think it's hard for people to decide where they want to play. I think a lot of people at this point, if you're seasoned, you're probably a loyalist to a certain section or a certain committee or a certain band, and that's where you go. For a lot of people don't have great experiences year to year, so they may jump around in search of the best fit for them, and that's cool too. I know we've kind of done the same, and this year was the year that I started to feel like I found a section again where I'm pretty comfortable. But again, you know, it's going to be different for everybody. But to that point, I do think the marketing is starting to become a little stagnant and repetitive, and you know, it is straying away from, well, why do we play mass, and should you come and play mass with us? And it's becoming more of a, look how fun we are, don't you want to be here, or you should be here. And I think that does culturally, for first timers especially, culturally, it takes away from any education about why do we even do this? Like, what is the significance of the road? Why do we cross the Savanah stage? What's so important about it? And I think if you like soca music and you like mass culture and you're around it enough, you'll probably put two and two together. We sing about the Savanah stage. We sing about the road. You know, all of those things are in pieces of culture where you could pick out that it's clearly significant, but a lot of times you won't know why unless you research it or you figure it out on your own. And that's because marketing these days, they don't tell that story. And I think it's because, in part, I don't think it's a story people care about. A lot of people see mass, and the reason that they're coming down is because the costumes are pretty. Everybody's ridiculously beautiful. Big up Caribbean people one time. But also, in the same vein, they want an escape. They want to come and enjoy themselves. I don't think, unfortunately, everybody is tuned into the spiritual and cultural importance of the festivities. And that in of itself is something that, you know, I've been told before I have to stop forcing it down people's throats. So I'm not going to do that. But it's true. I can't force it down people's throats because, you know, you could only meet things as deeply as you meet it, or whatever that saying is, right? So if you don't care to know why the road is significant, why, you know, how things used to be back in the day, why the Savanah stage has so much meaning, you know, how this even came to be that we have these trucks on the road and we're tripping behind them for 2 days. If you don't care to know about all of that and you don't care to look or ask or do your research, I don't really think it's on bands to tell people, honestly. Does that mean that bands and fetes maybe don't have, you know, promoters and committees don't have a cultural responsibility to still infuse that culture into the experience? No, that doesn't really exempt them from that. But then again, they're not here to educate you, because in the same vein, they're from there. They know what they're doing and why they're doing it and what experience they want people to have. So that's what they're giving you. But if you're coming and you don't know why all of these things are even here in the first place, that's a you problem, right? But then you can't come, as we were saying before, and tell people how to service you and how you expect them to treat you and what you expect your experience to be, because it's not just your experience. It's the experiences of a lot of other people who came down with that same expectation. And if you don't look at it as an experience that's deeper than just your experience, then you're never really, unfortunately, going to unlock the joy that is mass. Because mass, like I said before, carnival is really about a shared experience, at least to me.
Yeah, I think, like, super well said, of course. And I do think you bring up a really good point, right? Which is, like, ultimately, where does the responsibility of caring for Trinidad Carnival roots and traditions and culture, like, where does that responsibility and who does it fall on, right? Does it fall on the masquerader? Like, are they supposed to be the ones to do their research and fly in and then, like, do this festival and then care about it? Or is it up to the mass bands, and are they supposed to be the ones to, like, get people to know what that means and what that is? And I think you're right. Like, it's a tricky thing. But, like, ultimately, you know, if a mass band exists to just, like, you know, give people, like, one big party that's not very in tune with, like, the cultural aspects, and if there's a demand for it and that's what people want, and there's people buying, you know, that experience, then that's what those people want, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you're right, like, if you do want a really cultural Trinidad Carnival experience, like, there are bands that serve that, right? There are local bands that do that. There's Lost Tribe, and there's lots of other ways to be able to experience the roots of Carnival, and it's just a matter of, like, do people care enough to do those things?
Yeah.
Right? And that will exist for those people that care to do it. And the people who just want to come to just party and let loose and just, you know, not really be too in touch with the culture, which personally I think is a sad thing, but to each their own. then that also exists for them as well. There's fetes where you could just go and you could just drink and party and do all that. And, you know, and that's not to say that you can't do both, because you can. I think sometimes we do both. But I think like pretty much it just comes down to people seeking out and supporting the experiences that they want to have.
Yeah. I think, you know, just because we play pretty mass in a big band that's popular and often pretty crowded doesn't mean the road's any less important to us, because we do that. I mean, we'd be hypocrites if we didn't acknowledge that, right? You know, I play mass. I play pretty mass. I don't put on a cultural costume. I put on what is now become a carnival costume, which in many cases it is a pretty skimpy 2-piece bikini, and that's what I like, and that's what works for me. And I like my big feathers, and I go on the road, and that to me is my costume. But that doesn't take away the cultural experience and the spiritual freedom, and just the overall what I feel is oftentimes like a religious experience for me of being on the road. And to me, that's my experience. For someone else, they may look at that and say, well, I don't like this costume. It's not for me. And this band's not for me, because they're not really serving what I want my mass to be. So they would play with Lost Tribe. And that's cool too. Other people may look at both those bands and say they're too big, they're too expensive, whatever the case may be. And they'll play with a smaller local band in a similar costume to what I wear, just in a smaller band. That's maybe a little more affordable, not as many foreigners in it. But for them, that's mass, and that's what they want to do. And that's cool too. So you can't really generalize the road experience to say, just because you play in this band, it's not culturally in tune. I do think the responsibility is really on each person. And it's really not even the responsibility, but it's really the intent. And a lot of people, carnival is mass marketed, right? That's where we are these days. It is a business. Bands want to fill up their sections, and section leaders have a responsibility to ram out their section and make their money. And that's them. And the people coming to play in those respective sections or respective bands, it's their choice to figure out, or, they have to figure out what they want their experience to be, as you said. And, just because they choose one experience like we do to play in a certain band in a certain costume doesn't mean we're less culturally attuned. It just means this is what we want our road experience to be. And everybody else may not relish and understand the cultural significance behind playing mass in the band around us. Maybe it's like 40 or 50% of people that get it, and then the other 50 just came down to have a good time, and they were just there for the costume and the feathers and the Instagram pictures and the videos, and that's cool. But at least I know in my heart why I'm there. And I think that's really the most important part. Is it sad that maybe a vast majority of people come down and just play to play, and they don't really know and never will know culturally and historically why this is so important and why this even happens? Yeah, it's really sad. It's sad to me, right? But I've had to learn over the years that that's them, right? If they're paying their money and that's what they want their experience to be, great. Do I think they should try to do research and, like I said earlier on, learn that and recognize that they are participating in something, that they are not coming down to dictate the terms of what this should be and shouldn't be and why we should do things a certain way? I think that very much needs to be understood. And I think the only way to understand that is by doing your research, because that's the only way you would see that it's so much bigger than just you and your experience. But I don't think a lot of people would do that, right? And even if they do, it might not make a difference in their mass experience. They may still want to just come down for the party. We've met people that have literally said to our face just that. And I'm like, well, like, it's so much more. Like, don't you want to know? Don't you want to feel this? Don't you want to, understand where all of this comes from? And they've just looked at me point blank in a fet and said, no, I don't really care. And in those moments, I really want to lose it. Like, because you're essentially telling me that my culture that you are currently indulging in doesn't matter to you. You're just there to have a good time and F all else. And that's really hurtful and kind of insulting, honestly, because I take a lot of pride in our culture and history. But again, they paid their money and they're there. And that's why a lot of people argue that maybe we should start gatekeeping. But, you know, I don't think we can do that at this juncture. And I think all we can do is try our best to educate those that want to be educated. But I also think I maintain that people have a responsibility to know where they're coming. You know, you wouldn't go to another foreign country and just expect everybody to, this is a very wide example, but you wouldn't expect that if you're speaking English and you go to a Spanish speaking country, that everybody suddenly starts speaking English just because you're there. It's the same concept. If you're coming to participate in a cultural festival, understand it, know it, respect it, recognize that you are a participant, and enjoy yourself to the fullest because you're paying to be there, and that's great, like I've said before. But be mindful. That's really all, you know, all we could ask, I guess, is that you just be a little mindful. And I think that lack of mindfulness is probably, you know, to your points, why it's so sad to see, and why it can feel pretty disheartening in your roller coaster of emotions on the road, because it does sometimes feel like people are just treating it as one big party, when for people that are invested in it culturally, it does mean something so much more.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, I think we touched on that really, really well in terms of like the duality of emotions when it comes to mass, people having to like culturally find it, and then people just kind of seeing mass as one big party. I don't want to stay too long because we were already like an hour and 45 minutes in. But speaking of party, maybe it's time we move on to Road March. I want to wake all you up. Road March. Road March this year was fucking awesome. Wow. We did have like, actually, you know, like looking back on it, you know, like in our last podcast episode, we spoke a little bit about like some songs that we thought were contenders, but like, you know, obviously Mashal dropped his song afterwards, and there were other songs as well that came out from the last episode to now. So why don't we start with this? Why don't we all know that Mashal Montano won Road March already with Party for Road March 2025. But let's start with like what some of the contenders we think were, and then kind of talk a little bit about it and kind of give some perspective to like how we felt when we heard certain songs like on the road or in a fet, and then ultimately like I'll kind of go into a little bit about like why I think Party actually won Road March this year, because there was an intention to win with that song.
Yeah, no, let's get into it. I mean, I'll go first in saying that in our last podcast, I spoke about this pretty in depth. And what I spoke about was how Carry It at the time when we filmed the last episode was really, at least to me, and I think I said this in the last episode, Carry It was to me the forefront in the Road March race when we filmed the last episode. And that was probably 3 months ago at this point, 2 months ago, technically. And again, this was, as Rit said, this was before Party dropped. Carry It shelled parties earlier on in the FET circuit. And this was, again, before Mashal dropped the banger that is Party. The reason at the time, you know, I think we all felt very strongly about Carry It, and still do, honestly, is because Carry It really did invoke a feeling of nostalgia that, you know, I think Bungie Garland has always talked about and addressed, particularly in recent years, of what FET culture used to be like. And we've talked about this in previous episodes too, even before Carry It, that FETs just used to be different, right? They're, you know, it never really used to be, as we were describing earlier, like a stand up on your phone kind of thing. It used to be when you came out to Fete, you usually came out with your sneakers and your shorts and your t-shirt with a rag or a flag in your back pocket. And that's really the generation and the sentiment and the era of feting that Carriot invoked in a lot of people. And I spoke about how in the song Carriot, Bungie Garland calls out a lot of different places in Trinidad. And it's places that folks that aren't familiar with places in Trinidad probably wouldn't have recognized unless you're from there or have family from there. So it was pretty significant to see the way that Carriot did start to build very early on in the season, even up until the end of the season, where you did have people that the song grew on that weren't even from Trinidad, but here they are chanting out the names or trying to figure out how to pronounce the names as some of these really, important places in Trinidad or different places in Trinidad. And that momentum was great to see because there was truly an organic build in the sense that it just happened. He performed it at a Fete or two, and the momentum and the energy for the song just built over time and throughout the season. Did it carry it to the end? No, and I know a lot of people were a little upset about that, maybe a lot of upset about it. It was a very close race. I don't know if you have the results in front of you, but if you look at the end results, Mashal did win by like a handful of points with Party, but Carriot was right behind it. And I think in that sense, that just goes to show, what dropping a song early in the season can do and how a song can organically build when it does connect, because it did connect with a lot of people, particularly a lot of people who were nostalgic for or reminiscent of that generation of feting. And I think the song really did bring back a resurgence and a pride and a desire for that type of feting, which is why we saw Bungie shell so many fetes and why he did his own event. I believe it was the week before Carnival week, and I heard that event flattened the place too, and it was a very like no phones, rag in the air kind of vibes, and I love that. And I think that's exactly what that song invoked, and to see what it produced is awesome. However, in terms of a road march, and I'm sure Rich will get into this extensively, in terms of a road march, the dropping of Mashal's song Party and the builds and all the little things that happen throughout the season that really emphasize the song and the meaning behind the song really drove Party over the edge. And because a lot of non-locals and non-Trinidadians, don't understand that nostalgia sentiment that Bungie was, echoing in Carriot, I think that also really pushed Party over the edge because the lyrics were so much more relatable to the masses in the sense that it's something that everybody feels right now. We work so hard all week, we deserve a party. I don't think there's a person in the world right now that couldn't relate to those lyrics. And I think just the energy overall that the song had, you felt a palpable difference. We could talk about the different songs on the stage, but that one was really, what at least in our band got the crowd going. And I know a lot of people in different bands said the same thing about Party. And I think it won, deservedly so. It was a close race just based off of the numbers. But I think when you look at the trajectory of both songs, they both had a fantastic run. I think one was just clearly more of the road march made song, and one was just a song that was in the right place at the right time and did truly resonate with a lot of people, but not enough and not long enough to carry it, no pun intended, to carry it to where it needed to be to win road march.
Yeah, all very good points. In terms of road march contenders for me this year, I think I had 4 songs that I really liked for road march or saw as road march contenders. first, it was definitely Carry It. And in the beginning, oh, you good?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, in terms of Road March contenders, there were definitely maybe like 4 songs that I felt were contenders for Road March this year. First was Carry It, which obviously we saw what it did in the beginning of the season, like you said. My second contender I thought was actually that I actually enjoy a lot. I do love Road Meeting a lot by Fan. Every time I hear that song, I enjoy it every single time. Like, I love how catchy it is. I love the build up. I love the iron in it. As a standalone song, I thought it was just a really, really good song. And it definitely put me in that mood for being ready to go on the road and to cross the stage. And I loved everything about it. I know you specifically loved Patrice's song. Also really, really great, very wholesome, soulful Road March song. What was the name of it? Let's look it up. I just want to make sure people can look it up and have the name of it.
Yes,
I can't get it on the top of my head.
I want to actually figure out when she dropped it, but I don't think I can look that up from here. But it was called The Great Escape.
Yes.
I can't remember when exactly. Actually, maybe see if I could find it. But to me, this was my spiritual Road March. I always have one that obviously wins, that I back, or is one of the contenders to win that I back. But then I always have one that I just love, that I think is a perfect stage song that just, for whatever reason, it doesn't get popular, or it just doesn't get marketed well, or whatever the case may be. But for me, that was Patsy's song. It came out actually a month ago. The video was actually pretty nicely done. And when did it drop? Oh, February 4th. So yeah, February 4th, which was actually exactly a month before Carnival Monday, Tuesday this year. So she had a month. It was produced by Tano and Precision, both 2 producers that I love. So, you know, I think that also just, you could tell in the production that it was a quality production. And yeah, I just, you know, I love the song. I think there was so much meaning to it. I've been listening to it nonstop in my post-carnival depression, because I just think it is a very spiritual, like, feel-good carnival song that was actually made for the stage. I think it would have been a great stage song with a proper road mix. And I was sad to see that it didn't get more forward. So I'm glad you brought it up, but that's my, in my heart, that was my heart's Road March.
Yeah, so there were definitely contenders for Road March, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, right? Like, we had choices for Road March, right? Because then the final one in that list was Party. So in terms of Road March contenders, we had Carry It, right? We had Road Meeting, we had Great Escape, and we had Party. So 4 very, very awesome songs, right? All made you feel different ways, right? But ultimately, one of them is what ended up winning Road March, specifically Party, and only one of them could make you feel a certain feeling that was just right specifically for this year for crossing the stage. And that was Machel Montano's Party. And I think what people need to realize about Road March is having a great Road March song is literally just one aspect of winning Road March. It's not the complete package, and having a great song alone will not get you the title of Road March champion, right? And when I really think about it more and more, Machel really deserved to win Road March this year, because him and his team put in the work to market Party to the masses and turn that song from just a song into an experience, right? Because that's really what it was. Every time you heard Party, every time you saw Machel Montano perform that with his live band, every time you touched a stage and that song came on, you felt an experience. And this was a very engineered experience that he and his team thoughtfully crafted in a very short amount of time. So people talk about, well, how does Machel do it? And, how specifically did he, pave the way for his road to his 11th road march, right? Because that is pretty much what it was. It was his road to 11, as Navinja called it, right? And I think that Machel did a number of things to solidify Road March. Like, one, he released it pretty strategically. Like, it pretty much came out in like January 17th, so he had a good amount of headway of dropping the song relatively not early in the season, but early enough to give himself space to really build the hype of the song, on top of that, like, what I really loved about it was how the release was like teased, in the sense that Party was marketed along with Mega, right? A lot of people don't realize that this was Machel Montano's big return to performing in Trinidad Carnival since 2020. Like, we've not really seen this man, with an exception here or there, come with the full force of his band in almost 5 years, essentially, in Trinidad Carnival. That's a big thing, right? So to accompany such an epic return, what did he do? Like, he sat down with his team. He literally marketed, right, these little mini trailers for Mega that teased the song before it even came out, which I thought was so awesome, because everybody's watching these videos, and you just hear boom, 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 Mega, and I'm like, oh shit, like, I could just feel the hype, right? And then you just hear the let's get it started before it even came out as an official song. So I think marketing Mega along with Party, you got this thing where, like, you weren't just getting you weren't just getting Machel's big song, you were also getting the anticipation for his first big epic performance. And once Mega actually happened, the very next day you saw a video of his entrance to touching that stage, which, man, they really went all out with the production. I'm talking, like, it wasn't just a blast of confetti, it was raining confetti at this event. There were fireworks everywhere. Machel's energy and the band's energy when they touched that stage was incredible. And I just really got to give a huge shout out to my friend NH Productions, Navinja, because he and his team captured the epicness of all of that on video so perfectly, meaning it was a full multi-camera production. This wasn't just no phone video. This was a full multi-camera production that when you watch that Mega video of Machel touching stage, you felt everything that the crowd was feeling in that show. And that's what I mean. That marked the beginning of engineering Party as an experience, not just as a song. Because now when everybody thinks of this song, they just thought about all the epicness of that video and of that show. And Machel just kept that momentum going for the whole season, right? There was never really a show that was as epic as Mega in terms of production and scale, but he really kept the energy of Party just going when he performed it. And it's not just that it was catchy and everything like that, but the one thing I respect about him is that he did not perform the same exact set across every single party like you see so many other artists and so many bands doing. Like, when we spoke to members of his team, he had 3 different versions of the song. So he had like an a cappella version where you would get the crowd to sing it. He had another more epic version that was high energy to just really drill it into the crowd. And then he had another version, which I didn't get to see. But long story short, the arrangements of the band and how they performed it was executed so well and had some diversity to be able to make sure that the song would not get stale. And I think that was so important. Put aside that, what he also did to just get international eyes on him was the Tiny Desk concert. Like, a lot of people say, okay, the Tiny Desk concert had nothing to do with Road March. Dude, Tiny Desk concert had so much to do with Machel winning Road March. Like, that literally took international eyes and put all of it on Machel. Literally highlighting Soca on a platform that bigs up so much international music, and having Mashal being the first to do that was so important. Because yes, while he didn't perform Party at the Tiny Desk, it still got everybody to finally look at Mashal and look at Soca and just really put so much attention on him. And all that attention was necessary to keep the momentum of Road March going. And then lastly, you know, throughout the whole season, Mashal was just consistently doing what he does, which was investing in his video content after every show. After every single Fed, this dude had a recap. And he didn't just have a recap from one videographer, he had a recap from multiple videographers. So you got like the short form content that was more vloggy. You got like some epic, like, you know, recap videos. And then you also got like your phone content like in real time, right? So all in all, I just want to say that Road March this year and Party's win was very thoughtfully engineered. And I do think that all these things went together to ensure that Mashal won Road March. And that was all things that he invested in. Like, he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that, you know, the song had the effect that it did. And I just want to congratulate him. Because I saw the work that they put in to make sure that he won. So long story short, Mashal deserved to win Road March this year because he invested so much into the marketing of Party, into making sure that the crowd had an experience every single time, and to making sure that he delivered on his performances in terms of the arrangement and having different types of ways of performing the song so that it would not get stale. Yeah, long story short, you know, he deserved to win.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, aside from all of the very well thought out ideas and thoughts that, you know, Mashal and his team put into this season to make the song what it was, there were a lot of smaller moments too that really amounted to large moments in terms of just connectivity and bringing Mashal on the ground again with people that really do admire him and see him as, you know, legendary, because he is, for soca, and he is an iconic person in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things that I would like to highlight that he did was the contest for, you know, win a party, the party, win a party with Masha Montano. That the winner, the group that actually won that and got to have a party with Mashal was actually the National Center for Persons with Disabilities in Trinidad. And it's just, you know, I commend him and his team on just putting that production together. I think it happened pretty quickly after they won. They made sure that these children got a party and these people got a party. And I think that in of itself is just shows, you know, not just because it wasn't just a marketing gimmick in that sense, but it just shows that Mashal really went the extra step to connect with people and have the song also connect with people in what he was doing, because everybody deserves a party, right? That was the whole sentiment of the campaign, right? You deserve a party. I deserve a party. Peoples with disability deserve a party. And, you know, I think it was really, really, really well thought out and really, really well intentioned. And I love that he went there because I got to look it up, but like the organization themselves were so grateful to him. And they, you know, made a whole video, you know, to thank him. And it was, you know, it just, I mean, it moved me to tears when I saw the news, you know, coverage for it, because I think it just really goes to show that, you know, that he cared and he put a lot of thought and effort into this season, but also into the words behind the song that, you know, everybody deserves a party. And I think it truly was an emotional journey this year for him. And, you know, I think he even teared up in the video that came out talking about his time with the NCPD. The other thing that I really liked that he did was his moments in CIC bringing up Bridget, like, who was a longtime fan. And if you followed her on social media, I don't know her personally, but I followed her a long time, both like on different social media platforms, and, you know, just to see her love for Machel and what it meant for her as a long time fan of Machel to grace the CIC stage, which, you know, for those of you who don't know, CIC is another huge party in the Carnival Fete circuit. And that particular event, we weren't there, but, you know, we saw the videos and we heard that Machel was actually sick and losing, you know, his voice was starting to go a little that night. And they brought Bridget up. And again, just the way it was captured, as you were saying before, all of these little moments that just kind of happened throughout the carnival season, they were captured and they were documented. And I think that meant not only so much for the song and its campaign, but you could see it genuinely meant a lot to Machel and to his fans, who really got to experience the song party with him. And I think that above all is what took it over the edge, because not only is it so relatable to everybody, but he made sure that people had an opportunity to show how it was relatable to them. And Bridget shelled that CIC stage with Machel, and you could just see, you know, she is owed half of that road march, because she really she killed it. She knew the song word for word, and she went up there and she crushed it with him. I think even Machel was in awe. And lastly, even leading up to, I think it was the week before Carnival, where this cute little granny, she posted a video about, you know, Machel and the song, and he went and he found her. Like, he literally found this little old lady whose video went viral, and he went and he visited with her and had those moments with her as a much older fan and longtime fan. And I think all of those little things, which, you know, maybe the masses didn't take into account when they were crossing the stage and, you know, talking about who they wanted for Road March, all of those things ultimately tied to the story that was Party and the story that was Machel this season. And it wasn't just the Machel story this season and Machel's Road March. It was the story of Machel and the year it became everybody's Road March, because he really allowed you just in those moments and becoming and making himself more accessible and making himself so much more on the ground to see how much the song meant to everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I think like that's such a good point, because that is really what it felt like this year, right? It felt like Party was everybody's road march this year. Not in the sense that everybody wanted Party to win, but in the sense that it just feels like it belonged a little bit to everybody. I think that's just because it was so relatable, right? So yeah, 100%. I want to give like huge shout outs to Machel, because it's incredible. It's incredible to see him, and it's incredible to see the team at work. So yeah, we're at 2 hours and 12 minutes. Do we have any final thoughts about Trinidad Carnival 2025 as a whole?
Probably still have a lot of thoughts, but I think some of them are definitely recurrent topics that we can talk about in future episodes and probably with future guests as well. So I think I'll hold on some of those for sure.
Yeah.
I think just closing thoughts, you know, I've returned at Carnival season. Carnival is Bacchanal. We said that in the last episode. But as I suspected, it truly made for an incredible season. Bacchanal and all aside, I thoroughly enjoyed my Carnival. And don't be fooled, my Carnival was not perfect. And I think both of our takeaways this season, especially as we've been doing this for a while and we've experienced a lot of different events and, you know, a lot of different road experiences, you know, we can safely say that no carnival is perfect. As we echoed a lot in this episode, you know, it really is what you make of it, but it's also what you allow it to be for you. And it's, again, at least to us, not just an experience that is for us as individuals, but something that we share with a collective when we go to participate in a fete or to play mass on the road. And I think that's something that more than ever I felt this year, and I wanted to feel this year, because I put anything that went wrong out of my mind, and I took myself out of my little crappy experience that I might have been having in a moment. And I remembered the bigger picture of, why do I love this? Why is this important? And why am I here? What do I have to be thankful for? What was this before I existed? And what is it today? And why is it important that I continue to show up for my culture and I continue to participate in it, holistically? And it was those things and those thoughts and keeping those things in mind that really made this season so much more meaningful to me. And I think even despite the little hiccups that happen here and there, because it is inevitable, I truly think this was the best carnival season I've had in a long time. And I think that was the sentiment too for a lot of people, because there was that overall theme of just, we work so hard and we deserve this, but also we deserve this and it's our own. It's like we thing. And I really saw that deep resurgence, maybe not across the board, but I saw the beginnings of a really powerful resurgence of ownership in carnival culture, and people just taking a stand and taking ownership of everything, and fetes going back to the way that they used to be, with the same spirit and energy and just the genuine optimism that was felt overall throughout the road in the faces of the people that I saw and the spectators. And I just hope that next year is even better than before. I'm sure it will come with its own trials and tribulations and bacchanal and whatever in the lead up, but all of those things is just what makes the experience what it is, and what makes every year in particular unique. And I look forward to what's to come, but I hope everybody else had a similarly great carnival if you went down. And if you didn't, we'd love to hear a little bit, if you did or if you didn't, we'd love to hear a little bit more about it, what you liked, what you didn't like. But overall, I hope it was as great for everybody else as it was for me.
Yeah, that's really well said. I don't really have anything to add to that because I think you summed it up perfectly. But yes, this carnival definitely was different. I think there was so much optimism on the road. There was energy, but I feel that there was more optimism than there was energy, and that's a good thing. And I just remember saying to people, like in a post-COVID world, I do truly think it's going to take a little bit of time before we get back into the full swing of things. But I definitely could feel the love and appreciation for culture this year. And I think that we're starting to see a resurgence of that. And I do want to see that trend continue. I hope all of us, to some shape or form, as Caribbean people, continue to understand why Carnival, specifically Trinidad Carnival, is important. And as the year goes on, the carnival for all the other Caribbean countries as well. And just remember to understand why we do mass. Like, go party and enjoy yourself, of course, have the greatest time. But I just continue to urge everyone to be mindful and to always be grateful for what we have culturally, because this is very much us. And if we don't keep it alive, and continue to support it and keep it true to its essence, then, it forever changes and it could potentially die. So, yeah, I'm super grateful for this carnival. I think for myself, it was definitely one of the best ones that I've had as well. And I'm definitely looking forward to next year's. So, yeah. As always, thank you all so much for listening. Be sure to comment. Be sure to keep an eye out on Instagram and TikTok for all our micro content. Leave your comments on our full episodes, which is, first and foremost on YouTube, but also available on Spotify. And I believe I finally figured out the Apple Podcast thing. So please be sure to check us out there. As always, love all ya. Thank you so much for listening. Big up and bless.
DSA Analyst. Caribbean culture to the world. Subscribe now on YouTube, iTunes, Podcast.